What's the difference between space-time and time-space? Are these two realities a theory of everything? Is anti-gravity and free energy possible? Come on, let's warp space and time and access the Akashic records. Welcome to episode 8 of Accessing the Akashic Records, the Metaphysical Science of Space, Time and Time-Space. So here we'll be getting into the metaphysical science of what most mainstream would call pseudoscience, and why they give it that derogatory term I will cover later when I talk about the philosophical impact part of at the end of the episode. Now, thanks to the mainstream education, our conventional understanding is time that is simply linear, going from the past to the present and into the future. Now, when we think of space, we understand it as being up, down, left, right, back, forward. But is this really how it is? Or is this just our objective perception in this holographic universe? And has our conventional education been intentionally created this way to hide the truth about the nature of reality itself? Well, to understand time and space, a great place to start is with Dewey B. Larson and his reciprocal systems theory. Basically, it states that there's two realities that exist. One that we currently exist in, called space-time, and that has 3 dimensions of space and 1 of time, and the opposite is time-space, which consists of 3 dimensions of time and 1 only of space. So this is often referred to as things like the unified field, the source field, morphogenetic field, ether, astral realm, and many others. You know, I could go on and on, there's just so many of them. But basically, it's where information from this physical reality exists more like data or information in a spiritual, non-physical form in that realm. So these two realities are reciprocal and cannot exist without the other. So you have the opposite. So you have time in this reality affecting space in the other, and vice versa. You have space in this time affecting space in this reality affecting time in the other. So hence the term reciprocal systems. So you can say they have an equal and opposite reaction. It also says that all matter is actually motion of energy through time. So it also explains how gravity is actually a radiating force with an absorbing force. And it also explains how levitation and anti-gravity and also free energy is not only possible, but relatively simple to produce, as I'll discuss later. And obviously you can see how this ties in with the previous episode of the electrical universe, because they're very interrelated, the reciprocal systems theory, an explanation of these other realms, and the electric universe model. They pretty much go hand in hand. They're almost exactly the same, you would say. There's just slight things left out of each of them that are covered in the other. So you could say they're reciprocal systems of each other. So I certainly think it's a much more conclusive picture of the bigger picture when you incorporate both of these theories. So, Dewey B. Larson was an American engineer and author of numerous books in the realm of physics, astrophysics, and economic science. In his scientific discovery of this reciprocal systems model, he discovered that space and time can actually be used as a far simpler form of measurement. So space over time equals matter, which is or also motion. So it's actually matter is actually slower than light or a low vibration of energy. So it's condensed down to a low, slow vibration to become condensed and become matter. So that's how it emanates through a vortex from one reality to the next, from one of these reciprocal systems to the other side. So time over space equals the non-physical energy, which is faster than light and a very high vibration. Now, the speed of this vibration will make a lot more sense as I explain it later on. But just take note of the speeds in vibration. So one's high vibration, the other's low vibration, right? Some of you may be elementary, but others I may need to emphasize these things for, and therefore I will. But as you can see in the diagram, any unit of measurement can be simplified with this model if we use this unified system of space and time to measure and calculate. So up there in the diagram, you've got distance, you've got parameter, unit, standard units, and space-time dimensions. Excuse me. So distance is meters in the conventional terms, which is m, but in space-time dimensions it's simply s, or space. Area is meters squared, so m squared, m with the 2 over, is the standard unit of measurement, but it can be simplified with space squared, or s2. Now again, volume, meters cubed, m with a 3 for cube, or it can simply be s cubed. And time is seconds, which is normally unit of s, could be simplified with time, represented as a t, and so on. So speed over, or velocity, is meters per second, which is m/s, could be simplified with space-time 1. And acceleration is meters over second, so it can be space-time squared, or minus squared, so it goes on and on. So it's all just a very simplified form of equations. So taking out all this and simplifying with all this, simply put. So that's much greater way of doing things, because it's a much more simplified version of working out everything. Now, concerning matter, we have been all wrong. What we have called matter is energy, whose vibration has been so lowered as to be perceptible to the senses. There is no matter. And that's by Albert Einstein, who created the theory of relativity that is somewhat not up with this new physics that I'm about to go into, but he still definitely had a vast knowledge of these other realities that do exist in parallel with this physical. He just couldn't get his head around it to describe the unified field, the unified theory, which was he was trying for his life, trying to make his life goal. Anyway, I've already mentioned that there's many respected scientists, such as I just mentioned Einstein there, and as you can see there, my favourite, Nikola Tesla. and many others who've come to understand and describe this spiritual realm called time-space. But it's also found throughout ancient history, quite often in a time called the Golden Age, where humans had created amazingly huge megalithic structures from statues, monuments, pyramids, and temples with feats of engineering that are impossible by today's understanding of physics. So, not only they spoke of not only did they achieve things like that in creating things like that, but they also spoke of achieving spiritual enlightenment by understanding and entering these realms of higher consciousness. The ancients of this time also spoke of interaction with other entities and from other worlds and other realities, and also talked about their craft in quite a lot of detail, such as the Mahabharata, that not only speaks of these craft called Vimanas, but has very detailed blueprints. And in these bottom pictures here, you can see some research material done by Russian scientist Alexander Golod, and where he created pyramids and found they created astonishing results, such as things being healed at an extremely fast rate, the beneficial increasing of the beneficial property of things like food, seeds, plants to create better yields and things like that. Basically, all increasing dramatically from being within this shaped structure. And there's many more experimentally positive results. But yeah, if you want to go into that more, then check out the comments section for the links. I can't cover everything in these short episodes. We can also find other scientific experiments where this field is being tapped into, such as Dr. Jal, who researched Tibetan sound levitation, where Tibetan monks would move megalithic-sized stones using a combination of meditation and sound to levitate them into place, using small, medium and large drums, trumpets, and a small army of monks who are well versed in meditation. So they use specific mathematics from distance and position away from the stone. They must be exact frequency of sound. They must also make an exact frequency of sound with each instrument, and even take into account the electromagnetic force that runs along the grid of the Earth, called ley lines, as you can see there on the right-hand picture, which have a large intersecting point in Tibet, which is where this was done, and that's also known as the Earth's crown chakra. And on the left there you can see Dr. Giles' diagram or picture of where all the monks were positioned along there on the left, all right around the instrument players, and then you've got the instrument players in the triangle, and then the distance to the stone. So it's all very scientific, like mathematically scientific, and all that, taking a lot of things into account in order to be able to do this. So it's no small feat, that's for sure. What these guys are able to do. Unfortunately, all this research material was confiscated from him. Only a small amount of it has been leaked out. Now, Victor Schauberger, as a child, he noticed how trout naturally defied gravity by swimming up waterfalls. Now, further in his investigations into this phenomena led him to discover the secrets of time-space manipulation and through the use of vortex, or as we'll discuss later, torsion physics or toroidal field. Now, I've already discussed it in other videos, so it may make sense to you. Now, Schauberger went on to create many machines and blueprints for creating craft that humans could fly in without being affected by gravity. Again, we have another Russian scientist, Viktor Grebennikov, can't speak right now, who observed this natural phenomena also, except he observed it in insects who simply should not be able to fly, yet somehow were able to. And upon further research, he discovered that in fact they levitated due to the geometric patterns in their wings, creating a vortex that removes their weight or transfers it into space, into time space, creating levity. He actually attached hundreds of wings to a platform that he created with bike handles and other instrumentation for directional purposes, and managed to levitate himself. And apparently he appeared as a wave or a shimmering sphere that looked similar to a cloud to onlookers who were on the ground. Now, if this sounds familiar to UFOs and their technology, anti-gravity technology, well, it should. Does it also remind you of the quantum wave collapse with the double slit experiment, where everything exists as a wave until it's observed? Hence, this is a holographic physical universe. All sound familiar? All sound like previous material I've touched on? It's because I'm putting this all together in a logical sequence to try and make things seem relatively logical in this concept, so they're not too far out. Now, Professor Nikolai Kozyrev is definitely one of my favourites, and is known to be one who's done probably the most work in the field, which he called torsion physics. And he figured out that using this toroidal field or vortex, that it would bend time and space, allowing things to travel in between these two realities. So what happens is, when using this vortex, it speeds up the vibration of the atoms to whatever is in the field past the speed of light, therefore moving them out of space-time and into time-space. So that non-physical realm. Excuse me again. So remember at the start I mentioned about the rate of vibration being important. Well, this is exactly why. Now, Dewey Larson explains in the reciprocal systems model that all matter is motion, so that means everything is already moving, and all that is required is a little help to get over that light speed barrier. And our neutrons, protons, electrons, atoms and so on are already the fastest moving part in us, reaching in excess of 2,000 kilometers per second. So it doesn't require a hell of a lot more to get it up to the light speed barrier. So these toroidal fields or vortexes, depending on their speed, size, shape, type of matter used to create them, will pop atoms from this reality, physical atoms, into the parallel one, thus removing some of the weight of the object and create levity. So with the right amount of engineering, you can balance this field so you have the required amount of levitation of an object. For example, increase the speed and size of the field and you can get more lift or lift a heavier object. So remember, these reciprocal systems are equal and opposite. So space here moves into time in the other reality. So this is exactly how we can move through time, by getting all the atoms to move beyond the light speed barrier and then pop back into this physical dimension, having moved through time in that parallel time-space reality. So wrap your head around that one. You may need to watch what I said again in order to wrap your head around it fully, because I'm talking about the reciprocal nature of both these realities and how you lose physicality in this reality but gain and instead move into time in that reality because you exist as a wave. And then once you've gone through time as a wave in that reality, pop back into this physical reality in space. So reciprocal. Hope that makes sense. Hope I'm not speaking Swahili. Hopefully I broke it down logically enough. Now we know that relativity theory states that an object gradually increases in its mass once we begin accelerating it near the speed barrier, light barrier, speed of light barrier. Yeah, and in conventional scientific thought, no object can exceed the speed of light, because as it approaches this speed, the equations state that the object will become infinitely massive, and then once it's infinitely massive, it can't gain any more speed. Enter Vladimir Ginzburg, who found that if you completely reverse these equations, you don't violate any known scientific observations. This means that instead of growing more massive, an object will actually shed energy back into the ether as it is moved, thus causing it to gradually lose all of its core characteristics of gravitational mass, physicality, inertial mass, and electric charge as it approaches the speed of light. So it's exactly how this is all possible. Now, there's plenty more material that I could cover about other experiments and scientific research, and not only other scientists and other experiments, but also there's tons from those guys that I've already just mentioned. There's also other guys in completely different fields who've discovered these same phenomena of anti-gravity happening within nature. But I'll leave it for now. I don't have time to cover absolutely everything. I've got to keep these episodes short and sweet and get to the punch. So if you wish, I need to get to cover the philosophical and spiritual impacts of these concepts, the punch, the impact of what it really means in the big picture. So if you want to find out more, then please do research on the scientists or in these fields I've mentioned, and look in the description box below for links. Please also understand that much of the work of these scientists has been covered up as they were hitting the true nature of reality and how we can manipulate time and space with the power of this technology. Many of these people who do make these types of discoveries get brought into unacknowledged special access programs within aerospace, military or intelligence agencies, and their work is removed from the public domain, or even worse, they just disappear. Physically, the people disappear. Now, this is not conspiracy, but simply fact. It is classified as a national security threat and then put under Invention Secrecy Act. Why? Well, simply, you could imagine if we all had the ability to manipulate space and time and had free energy, there would be no way that the economy would still work, and there'd be no possible way for policing and controlling the masses. Now, before you jump to any conclusions and think, well, yeah, that makes sense. So many bad people in the world that would just do terrible things with this. Well, remember, many people in these, there's many people who are in charge of these control structures and who've been socially and culturally engineering the Western world in terrible ways and deliberately generating perpetual war. So we're in a constant state of fear and therefore welcome these so-called the so-called protection and governance of these entities in which we willingly voted for. Have no doubt co-opted the education system to protect this information, so it's just not an option for exploration in the mainstream. And those who do so are simply ridiculed, banned from institutions, and sometimes assisted suicide, as I already said. It's also evident with the engineering the mainstream media, who only talks in extremely biased and way that suits a certain agenda of the political owners. Again, this is a rabbit hole of the vast cavern of research on its own, and no doubt there's an extremely intelligent suppression and control of the masses that's taking place, but regardless of who's at the top pulling the strings, from secret society members to entities from other worlds or dimensions. The point is we must break free from this suppression, and this type of technology is a great catalyst for breaking out of it and into this golden age that we're supposed to have entered into, energetically speaking. So this part of the cycle in consciousness evolution, known as the Satya Yuga, is where consciousness ascends and works in harmony with not only one another but with the earth or Gaia and all creatures who dwell upon it, where humanity understands its place in the bigger spiritual picture and knows that death is not the end but transition or transmutation, where love, equality, sovereignty and unity are the key principles around the world. A time where open contact with other entities occurs due to the change in consciousness, where humans build craft and begin to expand out into the greater galaxy and the universe to learn more and simply experience more. Now, before we wrap this up, as many of you know who already watch my show, you'll know that the Ra material is you'll be familiar with the Ra material. In the Ra material, Ra mentions that the physics explained by Dewey Larson is the closest to how things really work in regard to space-time and time-space. So let's hear a little insight from Ra on time-space. Questioner: as an entity goes through the death process in third density and finds itself in time-space, it finds itself in a different set of circumstances. Would you please describe the properties of or circumstances of time-space and then the process of healing of incarnative experiences that some entities encounter? Although this query is difficult to answer adequately due to the limitations of your space-time vibration sound vibration complexes, sorry, I'll get there. We shall respond to the best of our ability. The hallmark of time-space is the inequity between time and space. In your space-time, the spatial orientation of material causes a tangible framework for illusion in time-space. The inequity is upon the shoulders of that property known to you as time. This property renders entities and experiences intangible, non-physical, perhaps, in a relative sense. In your framework, each particle or core vibration moves at a velocity which approaches what you call the speed of light from the direction of superluminal velocities. Sound familiar to about everything we just talked about? Thus, the time-space or metaphysical experience is that which is very finely tuned, and although an analogue of space-time, so reciprocal, lacking in its tangible characteristics, in these metaphysical planes there is a great deal of what you call time, which is used to review and re-review the biases and learn teachings of a prior, as you would call it, space-time incarnation, so a life lived in the physical. So it's talking about how the soul goes through the review of each life. Now, the extreme fluidity of these regions makes it possible for much to be penetrated, which must needs be absorbed before the process of healing of an entity may be accomplished. So each entity is located in a somewhat immobile state, much as you are located in space-time in a somewhat immobile state in time. So we're experiencing an immobile state in time where we're only existing in the now, in the present. We can't exist in the future and in the past as well. We can only be in one time. So that's what it's saying there. So depending on this space-time locus, there will be certain helpers which assist in this healing process. So certain helpers in space-time to help with the healing process of getting over any things that you may be upset about in this life. So this process involves seeing in full the experience, the whole life, seeing it against the backdrop of the mind-body-spirit complex total experience, the whole package of what you are. And then forgiving yourself for all missteps as regards to the missed guideposts during the incarnation. And finally, the careful assessment of the next necessities for learning, so what you need in order to advance your soul. So setting up the things to hopefully learn those things in the next incarnation, should you require it. This is done entirely by the higher self until an entity has become conscious in physical space-time of the process and means of spiritual evolution, at which time the entity will consciously take part in all decisions. So the entity must, in this physical reality, become aware of the process of evolution. So you may know that in ancient times they spoke of, especially in Sumeria and Egypt, where they spoke of dying in this life, which is having seen the afterlife, having out-of-body experiences or near-death experiences, as we call them these days. Now, they induced them by the use of these pyramids and chambers, and they had other technologies that enabled them to achieve these higher states of consciousness and traverse these realms, go into the the time-space realm, and get an understanding. So they were able to go in between the two while still in this life. So that's essentially what's being put here. You need to become aware while you're in this life of what's on the other side, in order to consciously take part in all the decisions that happen in your process of evolution. Now, as a entity, or as a mass collective, I should say, as a collective evolves, they need technology. So particularly in third density or the third dimension, you require technology to be able to do these manipulation of these other realms, such as free energy and anti-gravity and things like that, and being able to get your body into those other realms. You need some kind of assistance. You can't do it just with your consciousness alone. These physical bodies are not capable. Even in fourth density, they're not fully capable of doing absolutely everything. So each step you continually evolve, and the vehicle that you're in allows you to do more with these manipulation of these fields and consciousness abilities. You gain more and more, and you rely less and less on technology, and instead the entity can do it for itself. So it's essentially an ascension where becoming godlike, becoming one with God again. So when these entities come down and they have these abilities, it's only natural that they call them gods, when really they're just beings that have gone through the evolution process and know how to manipulate space and time, and can understand why they're trying to suppress it from us, but at the same time we've got to show that we're ready for it and break free from these confines. So that's the philosophical impacts of it all. So you may not believe or agree with everything that I've put forward in this episode or any of the episodes that I've done, but hopefully it will encourage you to do some of your own research and see what the truth is for you. And remember, knowledge is power, and suppression of this knowledge is suppression of your power. So please hit like, subscribe, share, and leave some love or questions in the comments section. Until next episode, love and light to you all. Namaste.